At UFC 310 we saw one of the craziest robberies I've seen in my life. So I want to actually take this opportunity of like one of the biggest robberies of the year to talk about like the fact that the UFC, even though like I know people are gonna say that UFC they don't choose the judges, then the commission who is not directly related to the UFC they actually choose the judges for each event. So the UFC has no power of choosing those judges, and you're gonna say, oh, the UFC is not rigging it, the UFC has no power over it. And I understand, and I'm not saying that the UFC is directly doing something to change the results of the fights, but what I'm gonna say right now is that even though I don't think the UFC is taking a direct advance on changing the results of the fights, it's kind of a strange occurrence, because if you actually stop and look at all the robberies, like all the relevant robberies that the UFC had during those years, none of those robberies actually damaged the companies that much, you know what I'm saying? You're gonna say, oh, but Jose Aldo, he got robbed by Mario Bautista because Mario Bautista threw him against the cage for like 5 minutes and didn't do anything. But what did the UFC actually lose with this fight? They can still make the fight that everyone wants to see, which is Jose Aldo and Dominic Cruz, you know what I'm saying? So they didn't lose that much with their loss. And Jose Aldo is like out of his prime, he's older now, he's a legend of the sport, but like we know the UFC don't give a fuck about legends after what they did with Stipe Miocic and also his retirement. And like they gave like 1 minute of mic time to the guy, didn't even make a presentation at all. Anyways, we know the UFC don't give a fuck about their legends, even though they make it seem like they do. But when you look at the bigger robberies, like the big robberies with it's always the superstar who gets the advantage. You guys don't understand? You guys get what I'm putting down? Let's just look at some examples. Jones versus Reyes. Bro, we all saw Reyes beat the living shit out of Jones for 3 rounds. Like you can say that it was, oh, Jones, he won the last 2 rounds. Yeah, no one's gonna deny that. But Reyes definitely won the first 3 rounds. And guess what? The decision went to the undefeated, like one of the biggest stars on the sport during that time. Petty versus Jared Gordon, the same thing. We all saw Jared Gordon win that fight. Petty went to the delusional cope session of saying, yeah, bro, it was not even that close. But we all saw Jared Gordon winning that fight. Guess what? They gave it to the superstar. And right now we see Volkov and Gane. Like it's pretty clear who the UFC wanted to win that fight, because I've been talking about this a lot, but like if Cyril Gane lost to Volkov, the 2 wins that Jon Jones has in the UFC division will age really, really bad, because as I said in my older video, Jon Jones doesn't have a lot of wins that age really good. And Stipe Miocic, his last win, it was not even a case of badly aged win, because it was a Stipe Miocic who was coming off a loss, like brutal KO loss to Francis Ngannou, so we already knew. We didn't know which Stipe Miocic was gonna appear, but we saw which Stipe Miocic appeared. It was like a 5%. It was like a Stipe Miocic who had 5% of the ability that he had when he was at his peak. So if Cyril Gane somehow lost to a guy like Volkov, not much of a star, like he has a name on the heavyweight division, but the guy's not a star. He's not well known. He has some losses. He lost to Tom Aspinall. So if Cyril Gane lost to the guy who lost to Tom Aspinall like easily, we cannot make the Cyril Gane and Tom Aspinall fight, which is the biggest fight that we can make right now in the heavyweight division, not named Tom Aspinall and Jon Jones. And the name of Cyril Gane under Jon Jones' resume gets tarnished, because the guy, don't know why he was promoting Cyril Gane as this monster, like the number 1 guy in the heavyweight division. He just destroyed the number 1 guy in the heavyweight division. And if the number 1 guy in the heavyweight division loses into a decision to a guy like Volkov, who's not really known by the UFC, that tarnishes not only Jon Jones' legacy, but the capability of the UFC to make another cool fights, because now we know like Cyril Gane is probably gonna fight Tom Aspinall if Tom Aspinall doesn't fight Jon Jones. But if Cyril Gane loses, that fight cannot happen, and Tom Aspinall will have to fight like Volkov again if Jon Jones doesn't fight Tom Aspinall. So I think what I'm trying to say here is like, imagine if like for example Jon Jones lost to Reyes, that tarnishes the whole legacy of Jon Jones. Jon Jones has an argument for not being the greatest of all time right now. Imagine if Petty lost to Gordon. Petty at the time was the biggest UK star that they had. Tom Aspinall was on a rising, so Petty was the biggest star that they had. Imagine if Petty lost to a guy like Jared Gordon, a guy outside of the top 15, a guy who is known to not being that great of a fighter. Imagine if DJ won against Cejudo and left to the UFC to go to ONE FC right after. People would say, yeah, we lost the greatest, the UFC doesn't have the greatest flyweight champion. The UFC doesn't have the greatest flyweight in the world right now. Imagine if Volkov won against Gane. Like the amount of arguments that could have happened if these decisions went to the non-star, which would go badly for the UFC, is kind of crazy. So I'm not saying that the UFC is taking direct action into this, but it's really strange that like every time we see a controversial decision, the star or the guy who benefited the UFC always wins. Don't you guys think that's kind of strange? Like we will never see Reyes win a close decision against Jon Jones. Not not close, a controversial decision against John Jones. We never see Jared Gordon winning a controversial decision against Paddy Pimblett. You guys know what I'm trying to say? Like, this is not gonna happen. We know this is not gonna happen. It's like unlikely it's gonna happen. Sean O'Malley, we're not gonna see Sean O'Malley lose a controversial decision to Petrian. You know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to talk about it because it's kind of weird. Like, if you put in perspective, like how many controversial decisions has happened in the UFC and how many of them are literally like superstars winning out of nowhere. What do you guys think? If you guys think that UFC has somehow has a hand on this or not, like and subscribe. See you later.